evening. I'll be turning the microphone over to Daniel Isofano, who works with the consulting group MIG. The city has hired them to assist us in this process. Daniel and his group has been recognized statewide, nationally, and internationally for their innovative and productive outreach processes. And they have worked with us in the past with the City of Santa Barbara on Creeks programs and also our general plan update that we did in 1989. So we're happy to have support for today's public workshop. I just needed to cover a few housekeeping type items. We provided some snacks and beverages for you, and I wanted to explain that this is a zero waste event. All the food and food utensils and plates and napkins and cups can go in the yellow container. That yellow container, perhaps you haven't seen that, you know, the blue for recycling. Yellow is for compostable products. So we would like you to put all of those items in the yellow container. We also have blue for your typical recycling things. If you have anything that you brought in or you use a tea bag, there's a little box for trash. It's just a small little box, but mostly this is what we call a zero waste event. So I wanted to point that out for you. Thanks. And then we have bathrooms down the hall. There's a light down the hall, both men and women's bathrooms down there. Okay, so I think with those basic introductions, I see Mayor Marty Bloom is here, who has been attending the two prior workshops, and maybe you want to say a few words again. Sorry to spring it on you. Thanks.
No problem. Okay. Sorry I was a little late. This is a great turnout, and it's really wonderful. We have been having some very good workshops, and you know, when I think about it, Santa Barbara has such a tradition of citizen participation. It's unbelievable, and we continue that tradition tonight. Starting way back in the 1850s, and I'm not going to go through all of it. Don't worry about that. But when you think back, I mean, that's how we got Chase Palm Park, because a group of citizens said, no, we don't want buildings on there. We want a nice park for everybody, and Shoreline Park and Douglas Family Preserve. And, you know, when you think about all the things that citizens have done around here, it's wonderful. So tonight what we're going to do is just ask you what you love about Santa Barbara so we can try to keep it. How do you keep that? What are you worried about? And I know we always worry that this is turning into LA, so I'll just say it, because we always said that. But actually, what are the things that you think can really work? And something will dawn on you later on, and just feel free to contact us. We'll let you know how, but feel free to contact us later, because this is going to be going on for quite a while. And I'm going to give you over to Dan Isofano so I can catch my breath. There you go, Dan. Thank you for coming.
Very good. Let's thank the mayor for coming out this evening, and also for the city council leadership and putting this whole general plan Santa Barbara on the table here front and center. So we all thank you for coming out this evening. Again, my name's Daniel Isofano. I'm a principal with MIG. We are urban planning consultants, and we're fortunate enough to have been selected to assist the city in conducting this general plan update, what we call Plan Santa Barbara, living within resources, looking at the future of the city and deciding how it should grow, how it should develop, how do we protect the quality of life that everyone has come to love so dearly here in the city of Santa Barbara. So on behalf of everyone working on this effort, I want to thank you again for coming out this evening. We hope it'll be informative and productive, and we can guarantee your input will be used in shaping the future planning for the city. The city staff are truly excellent professionals. They put a lot of effort into it. We have our own local cable television, and for some of you coming in early tonight saw the production. It'll be airing on the cable station in the weeks and months ahead. We have an extensive grassroots community outreach program underway, and we intend to use that as a way to get people excited and interested in this whole future planning effort. In tonight's meeting, we wanted to give you a brief overview of what we call the Plan Santa Barbara program, how we have organized the effort, touch a little more on what the mayor referred to, the legacy of planning here in the city as well. And you all should be very proud of the forefathers and foremothers for their efforts in preserving important landmarks and features that today are the backbone and the spine of this entire city and contribute greatly to the quality of life. At the same time, nothing is the same. Nothing is static, and you have to continue to look ahead, plan the future, take stock of where you are today, and guide the city forward. So we know there are important issues the city will be needing to address, and that's a big reason why we asked you to come out tonight. So essentially, we're looking at the future growth and development in the city. What we call the general plan is essentially the constitution for land use and development. How many people have ever heard of this thing called the general plan? Let me just get a show of hands. Well over half. So, I mean, this is a city that does truly plan and does so in a very grassroots fashion. And if you ask that question, a lot of places say, you know, that's a fairly esoteric or arcane term. What does that mean? And clearly, we need to give it meaning through a process like this. And we hope to continue at various stages to come out to the public and neighborhoods and organizations to get your feedback. We're asking about the future of the city, and we want to know especially what you love about the city, what you think are the critical assets. They are the building blocks, essentially, and we don't want to inadvertently undo some of the very things that have gotten us here and preserved our quality of life. We want to know your vision of the future. What would you want to see going forward? And there's no set course here. We need to look at what's been done, look at the tradition, the history, the various charter amendments and policies that have been adopted, and evaluate those and decide how to carry them forward. And some of the concerns you have that might, in your way or view, shape or hurt us or another way affect the future. We need to identify that and begin to work on addressing those issues. Our legacy of community planning, as again has been mentioned, there are so many examples that you can point to in the city where change has occurred as a direct result of citizen action. And so there are going to be those kind of opportunities here. Even though we're taking a long-range view, as you think about day-to-day decision-making, there are planning commission meetings, design review, parks and recreation, all of these issues that come before those various boards and commissions and the city council do shape the future pattern of development. The result is the distinctive architecture and character of the city, the various parks and gardens and publicly owned spaces and parks and public areas that really define the public environment of the city of Santa Barbara. It's a very pedestrian-friendly, by and large, community, and hopefully we can continue to look at ways to make it both pedestrian and bicycle-friendly and also supportive of public transit. You have one of the first commercial growth management programs in the state of California, which was put in place in order to regulate the amount of development to ensure that it didn't overwhelm the scale and charm and beauty of the city of Santa Barbara. Key issues and trends, nevertheless, looking at the current environment in 2007, 20 years ago, the city launched the general plan, so we're essentially updating that view. And if you think back, there was no internet. We didn't talk about globalization. The countries of China and India weren't the powerhouse economies that they are on the way to becoming now, essentially replacing the United States in terms of worldwide growth and impact on the environment. So we have things that people could barely contemplate or imagine from now versus what we saw in the past. So we have done our own trends analysis, what we call the Conditions, Trends, and Issues report. It was done in 2005 as a prelude and as a foundational document for this general plan. It begins to look at all the critical categories for discussion and updating in the general plan. We talk about air quality, and some of the conditions there generally were in attainment on all state and federal standards with respect to Santa Barbara County, but also we do see continued significant sources of pollution from our motor vehicles and from marine shipping. That is one of the highest sources of pollution. Greenhouse gas emissions. Now that is a huge issue in the state, and we're looking at the impacts of dwindling oil supplies. We're looking at shifts from oil-based economy to other forms of energy development and distribution. Again, ideas that in the 80s we weren't necessarily ready to make some of these shifts, but now it would appear within the United States and across the world, we're in a beginning of a major shift where that's concerned. Water quality also is another key component of our environment, of our city conditions, and we have some bodies of water that do not meet federal standards. So we'll be focusing on those, and there will likely be new policies and new areas of emphasis in this general plan that weren't the case 20 years ago. We do look at urban runoff because of its critical impact on ocean water quality. The condition of beaches, creeks, and streams are all key factors here. Water supply. 20 years ago, there were concerns about the declining reservoir levels that are supplying Santa Barbara. Today, water is not so much the issue on the supply side, it's more on the quality side, because we do have generally supply capacity sufficient to meet demand as projected through the year 2030. But again, that's not something that you take for granted. You can see the 10-year rainfall history at Gibraltar, for example, and clearly the rainfall varies, and we can't assume that we're not going to enter another drought period and suddenly we'll be faced with water supply issues once again. So again, all of these factors need to be weighed and considered very carefully. Solid waste and wastewater, we talk about critical infrastructure elements within the city of Santa Barbara, and the Tehiguis landfill does have a 15-year capacity, so there is some room there. El Estero still has capacity as well, but you can see these are ultimately limited resources, and we cannot take those for granted either. The sewer system will also need repair and upgrading. These are things we don't see. They're below the surface of the street system, but nevertheless are vital to our public health and safety and well-being. Parks and recreation, another very critical aspect of neighborhood quality, of community quality and aesthetic beauty. We look at how these are being maintained and operated, and do we have sufficient park space and open space areas to satisfy the needs of our population. Currently, indoor recreational facilities is one of those areas that we're trying to focus on, and that's also documented in the conditions and trends report. And anytime we look at future growth, then obviously you have to consider the ramifications through all of these different topics. Land use and housing is an area where a lot of focus, a lot of attention has been placed over the years here in the city. Measure E, as you might have seen from the video, is a critical policy document passed by the City Council that limits growth. And in the year 2010, that Measure E expires. We're going to need to consider a replacement to that, and part of the discussion today will be feeding into ultimate City Council discussion on that Measure E of the future. What would be the successor to that measure? There are currently development units in the pipeline that will have an effect. They come in under current zoning and land use regulations. And by and large, the city has done a quite exemplary job in trying the best it can to make these units affordable. At least 30% are considered affordable by state housing definitions, which sounds like a good percentage, but just given the sheer number of people that need that level of housing and the fact that there is a limited supply of what can be built here, that's always going to be a tension point within this community. 58% of the units are renter occupied. We have to be concerned about providing a range of housing to meet different family needs, different income level needs. The design and configuration of housing, of course, is very critical, along with the historic character and preservation of existing neighborhoods. You can't talk about the future of Santa Barbara without talking about transportation. And here again, you've done a lot to make best advantage of public transit. You are attempting to plan your highways and other bicycle pedestrian systems in an integrated fashion. And there are dollars being allocated for these transit, bicycle, and pedestrian improvements that will take place as part of the city's transportation improvement plan and also within the region here in the South Coast. But still, neighborhood traffic is an issue, and you don't have to do a study to know that there are impacts of parking, of spillover traffic flowing through neighborhoods. It's a big concern. As we saw from the video a moment ago, a lot of people want to see that addressed. Urban design and views. Again, another critical topic which in Santa Barbara has to be part of the discussion, where you have the aesthetic qualities of the ocean, the beaches, the surrounding hillsides, the arroyos. All of these physical features and natural areas define the quality of life in the city, and we hear a lot of discussion about how do we maintain that as an element of aesthetic beauty and relief, but also as an environmental protection and conservation aspect. The community planning effort and the discussion here essentially involves this outreach process that we started back in April of this year, so it's been underway for several months. We do invite any community group or organization to contact the city and ask for one of these special meetings. We've got literally dozens of these going on, and they will continue all the way through the rest of the year. So this process does not end by any means with tonight's workshop. We expect to continue this dialogue. The workshops that we're doing right now here in June, and July 7th, by the way, will be the fourth in the series of 4 workshops that we're conducting. And if you know anybody that couldn't make tonight or would like to attend the same discussion and program that we have tonight, please join us for July 7th. We'll have more detailed information about that. And during the summer and this fall, we'll have more presentations, discussions with the many city boards and commissions as well. We're intending to have a series of educational forums where we invite local experts and other national leaders to come in, talk about many of the issues that get identified through this process. And it goes on from there. Unfortunately, it's a fairly lengthy and involved process. You'll see the dates here extend well into the year 2009. So we're really at the dawn of this process and expect to bring forward a strategic policy document or framework in the summer of 2009. So we have a fair amount of distance to travel here in shaping the future plan. And so once again, we invite you to check out our website, uplansb.org, which will give you the up-to-the-minute information about what's going on in this effort called Plan Santa Barbara. And you can log in there. You can be a registered user and get automatic email updates, so you can be always ready to, with the latest information. There's a library of documents and details there pertaining to the planning process. So that's all we'd like to say in the way of introduction and background information, and we want to get quickly to hear your thoughts, and the way we're going to do it is in several parts here. This evening we want to have initial open dialogue here about some of the assets, the things you care about most or cherish the most here in Santa Barbara. And so as many times as we ask the question, we always get very interesting stories and very impassioned commentary about what you really think is valuable here and needs to be recognized as such. And that forms the foundation for the future planning. So it might seem like a simple question to ask, but it's a very important one. It's a very foundational question for the planning effort. The second question is to ask you here is about the vision for the future, what you see for the city going forward, 5, 10, and 20 or more years into the future. So we don't have the answers. We're asking you to help us. We'd like to write down the ideas. Now, after this discussion, we'd like to go into smaller groups, and we found that in the workshops this has been extremely productive, so we get more people into the conversation. We can get down to a deeper level, more detail about some of the critical issue categories or topics that we just touched upon in the presentation overview. Many of these, again, are in the conditions, trends, and issues reports and covered in much greater detail. So that's how we'd like to proceed tonight. We've allocated to 9 o'clock or beyond if necessary to make sure we cover all the different ideas. Now we have Ashley and Michelle with microphones, and we'll pass those around to make it easy for everyone to hear everybody. So we'll bring the microphone to you. You just have to signal me if you have an idea or comment that you'd like to express here and bring into the mix. So again, we'll start with the first question. The basic point is, what do you love most about Santa Barbara? Perhaps it was the key feature that compelled you to come here to live, and why you remained here, and what you find most attractive, what you consider to be the greatest assets or the biggest, the strongest features of the city of Santa Barbara. So there's no right or wrong answer here, and we'd like to get some of your ideas into the mix so we can begin our conversation. And if we could, Ashley, this gentleman right here, and then there's a gentleman right back there that also has a hand up. So please don't be shy. We'll get the conversation going in. Please, yes, sir.
Well, for me personally, it was the walkability of the community. More than anything else. That, and then number two being the climate, which is kind of just a given. But that's the important thing to me. And walkability includes more than just the compact development. It's also the attractiveness. That's one of the ways to encourage people to walk, is to have interesting things to look at as you walk. And that's critical.
So you've got the walkability, the climate, the detail that is attractive as you walk in a fairly compact city format, city development pattern. Thank you very much. Let's go to the gentleman back here. And again, please raise your hand here. We've got lots of white space up on the board, so we're anxious to fill that up, and we'll try to get all the lights on if we could. No need to turn those off, so please. Yes, sir.
I would like to keep our existing low density, so I would like to say no to high-density smart growth.
Okay, so as a future vision, you like our low density, that's an asset, and vision-wise going forward, let's not see high density, and maybe the term smart growth implies that to you. And let's go to this lady right here, also has a hand up. We want to get some people over on this side of the room if we could, so please join in. Yes, ma'am?
I think since the growing of a community is kind of inevitable, our population growth, I think it's smart to grow up rather than out so that we can preserve the outlying areas of nature, the places where we recreate, hike, and bike, and so that we can use the existing infrastructure, our streets and our sewers and water, to protect the outlying nature areas and keep them preserved.
Okay, very good. So some different visions, which is why it makes it interesting here in this planning effort. Michelle, this gentleman, and then lady back here, a couple of hands up. We're looking for assets too. Don't forget the first question, what do you consider your favorite thing about Santa Barbara? We'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Go ahead, sir.
Small town feel. Feels like a small town to me.
Okay.
And access to the ocean and the mountains and many green spaces.
Excellent.
I love Santa Barbara. And I'm legally blind, so I remember how it used to be.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. The small town character, the green spaces, the oceans, the mountains, all of those elements. This lady, you had a hand up, Ann?
It's kind of echoing a lot of the other things, but just a healthy environment and the clean air.
Okay. Those are basic things. You know, it's interesting, the country of South Africa has actually put in their constitution that it's a right of all the citizens of South Africa to have a clean environment. You know, it's pretty interesting. They elevated it to as almost on a par with other basic human rights. Let's go to this gentleman right here, please. Thank you. key assets in the city?
Yeah, a key asset is the surf and the beach.
Okay. All right. Is that why you came here originally, or born here? Okay, excellent. So let's hear some other people. Do we have anybody on this side so we can keep things moving? Go ahead, sir.
Well, I love the aesthetic beauty of the architecture, the landscaping, and the land use, and making sure that people stick with those rules and not apply the rules and then grant tons of variances that then make it out of character with the rest of the neighborhood.
Okay, excellent. So you like those original features and properties? You want to carry that forward into the future? Yes, sir.
I had two things. People, I think the city has always attracted a lively quality of people to the community, and
many of them are here tonight.
Many of them here tonight. And the second thing is that the diversity, because of that, I think people from around the world find this an attractive place and find a way to live here. We have young and old and rich and poor, and the city's always been a welcoming place for all of them.
Excellent. Very good. A welcoming place. This gentleman in the back row, please.
When I first came to Santa Barbara in the early 70s, our family used to always say that Santa Barbara had a greener green. The trees, the foliage from any place else we'd ever been before, and it continues to be that way. And I think that's one reason why there's so much thoughts of a green Santa Barbara beyond just the trees.
Excellent. Let me ask you, where did you live before coming here?
Before that, back then, that was Los Angeles. We came up from Los Angeles, so
Okay.
it was important.
Quite a contrast then. Okay. Over here on this, in the back row, is this gentleman also is next. Michelle, just keep it moving. Go ahead, Ashley.
I agree with what's said before, but I also really appreciate the creative way the city has been able to recycle and rethink existing buildings rather than tearing them down and building up towers. The Art Museum used to be the post office. The Lobero office building used to be a hotel. Saks Fifth Avenue used to be Crocker Bank. Borders Bookstore used to be the Bank of America. And those distinctive parts of downtown have been preserved, the external edifices, even as the uses have evolved over time, which has spared the necessity for trying to build steel and glass things all over the place.
That's very exciting, and you need to keep telling those stories because new people or young people might not be aware of these adaptive and creative reuses that have been put in these structures. Go ahead, ma'am.
And Saks Fifth Avenue used to be JCPenney's.
So
I really, among all the other things that have been mentioned this evening, I really appreciate the cultural events that are available and the diversity of those events, not only at UCSB, but the traditions of the city, all the festivals and Fiesta and Solstice and all of those things. Growing up here, I really appreciated.
Right, excellent. And this go to Andrew.
Yeah, I'll add to the walkable aspect. It's easy to bicycle around Santa Barbara as well, safe and viable transportation. And I'll add to the cultural aspect. UCSB, Westmont, City College, they all bring tremendous academic presentations, and there's a real environment, there's a real smartness in the air.
So they produce that ambiance of academic thinking and new ideas, creativity. Very good. Yes, sir.
I would say that the ocean is number one, but close number two is the downtown area, and it's a always evolving place, but I think it just keeps getting better and better.
Where did you live before Santa Barbara, or did you grow up here? Or
I lived in the Bay Area for a while and then in Denver prior to that.
okay, you're very good. Interesting. This gentleman right up here. Go ahead, sir.
Well, absolutely, the climate for me is the number one thing here. But I would like to point out that those that prefer a low-density area versus those that would like to grow up, that those aren't mutually exclusive ideas. Certainly you can see that in Italian hill towns where buildings are 4 and 5 and 6 stories high, and yet right outside of town, no more than a quarter of a mile, there are open spaces and sometimes large piazzas in the center of town. So it's not as if these are mutually exclusive ideas. Another thing is that older people don't want change, and young people like change. And older people don't want to see, anything change, and younger people are looking for something more dynamic all the time. And I think that's part of life. I mean, that's not going to change. You're not going to change the character of old people and young people. Young people will get older, though. And
that's predictable.
And that is predictable. And I know that there's a way to make all of these ideas work together and in harmony without one side hammering the other to smithereens.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard the phrase that good people need to work with other good people and figure these things out. We don't want to fight. We want to do it in a very logical, civilized manner, which I think has been the tradition here in the city of this grassroots participation, trying to figure out policies that work for across the board, as you say, age, income, different kinds of people's needs. The lady in the back row there, Michelle, and then we'll go up here and let's just keep the discussion going. Yes?
Hi. I like the parks. I like the fact that they're all very closely interspersed together. I like the variety of the parks, the fact that you can find Alameda Park, Alice Keck Park, that you've got a lot of playgrounds around. And I also like the programming within the parks, the fact that there is a wide range of opportunities for kids as well as adults through the Parks and Rec Department, and I really applaud the city for what they've done with their Parks and Rec Department, and I like the walkability of the city as well.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. Let's go to this lady here, Rhonda.
I was just going to add the open spaces, and we need more open spaces around San Roque there. Okay. Yeah.
Very good. That ties in with the lady there previous. And let's go back to Al here. I'll hand you the mic.
As an 80-year-old, I'm proud of the city has the ability to change. And I beg to differ with him. I'm 81 years old.
Okay.
I learned to type blind. I'm completely blind. That is not true about older people. All older people are different. Okay. Sorry if I differ with you. You know me, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Let's set the record straight here. So, well done. Okay, this lady right here, and there's several other hands up, and then we'll go to you, sir. Go ahead.
Santa Barbara in 1968, I think. And the thing that struck me first and still remains with me that I love is that there are distinct neighborhoods, and people can meet each other, and you say where you live, you say you're from the Westside, you get a mental picture, and you know really where they are. And I think that's really wonderful.
Okay, and that creates almost a home base too. Each area has a little different flavor, a different character. The architecture of the houses, the open spaces, the public streets also define that very importantly. Yes, ma'am.
I think so one very attractive thing is the successes in historic preservation and the architectural controls that people from out of town notice.
Yes.
And don't forget the sign ordinances, the very strict sign ordinances, which are always a shock to outside people. I'm a native and a fourth-generation resident.
Excellent, yeah. Some of the inside story, the policies that have shaped that environment, and you've pointed to several of those. Yes, go ahead, sir.
I'm going to add to the mobility. I don't have a car. And I think the public transportation system is actually, MTD is a adequate system, I think, because Santa Barbara is compact enough. I can get from A to B reasonably well, and I feel good that I don't have to use a car while I'm in Santa Barbara. And I think that's true for quite a few people in Santa Barbara as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Excellent. How did you get to the meeting tonight? By bus or?
Yeah, and I also live 2 blocks that way. So
there you go. It's your neighborhood workshop right here. Thank you very much. And we'll be talking about future vision here, but are there other key assets? And let's talk about the vision for the future. How do you see the city moving forward? We heard some comments about that already, so these kind of things build on what we value the most about today, and what we'd like to see in the future really stems from that. So there was somebody in the back here who had a hand up, and we can talk about key assets, we can talk about future visions now, and really try to fill in the board. Go ahead. Wait.
which is in addition to the fact that we could become in the future, a totally walkable city, is our creeks. Because I was raised in the San Fernando Valley, probably like some people here. I never even saw a creek. I never knew they could exist in a city. And I live right across from one right now, and gives me endless pleasure. And I love to walk all the creeks, and I think we should be so proud of the great beauty and the trees along the creeks and the wildlife. And it's just one more beautiful thing and wonderful way in which we've preserved this city.
And there's more to go in terms of cleaning them, preserving them, and seeing them as vital sources of cleaning the water that they do, that natural function there. Let's see, there were some other hands up about future vision, so if you could just go ahead and find people. You don't have to wait for me. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to add a few more things I like about Santa Barbara would be the restaurants and the culture and the theaters, and I think there's just a lot of diversity in that area and a lot of good quality.
Excellent quality indeed. So other points about either key assets or visions for the future? Go ahead.
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I first came out here and with my folks in 1947, so I've seen some change. And then we moved to the San Fernando Valley and lived down there, lived in Hollywood, and then I'm back up here. But I kind of like dynamic change, And when you talk about you're getting involved with your agency, getting involved with it, and you're asking for outside input. And I'm wondering, I kind of I come out of 30 years of the aerospace industry, and one of the things that I really liked in the aerospace industry was some sort of a reward system. Okay, reward being that if you came up with an idea that was really viable and could produce something or could bring in monies or save monies, that it was it was there and you could get rewarded in some way. Mm-hmm. You're asking. I feel kind of like set back or a little bit hurt in some ways by feeling you're asking for inputs, and I don't hear any kind of if something really dynamic were to come up, is there any kind of a reward system?
You want me to pay you for each idea?
No, not necessarily, but in some way, something, if we can do something dynamic to the city and bring in resources, obviously there should be some reward to a individual or group.
Okay.
There's a lot of talent here. There's a lot of educated people. You got the universities up here. There's a lot to tap into.
Okay.
So that's...
All right. Well, it's a plea to think creatively, bring forward innovation, and we'll go to this gentleman and then back here. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I think our air and our water would be a lot worse today if it wasn't for the environmental movement that began mostly in the 70s. And Santa Barbara was a big leader in that movement, and we have a chance to be that again in the future. And what the last gentleman was talking about, rewards, there will be big rewards in that because that's going to be one of the fastest growing sectors of the economy is environmentally friendly technologies. So
absolutely. Countries and companies that are at the forefront of that are going to do very well. There are opportunities. Go ahead, sir. And then this lady right here has been waiting also. So let's keep going.
I'd like to see no population growth, and I'd like to see us live within our resources.
Okay. Zero population growth and living within resources, one of our charter statements, so to speak, fundamental statements. Yes?
One of the ways to ensure we have a dynamic future is to keep people of all demographics in our community. So affordable housing is an important component of that. And second, I want to echo the idea about cleaning up our creeks. They're in very poor shape. Beautiful resources, great opportunity there. Some work is starting to be done with some of the landscaping down at the west end of Cliff towards Arroyo Burro, and we have a lot that we can accomplish there.
I'm just kind of curious. You reminded me there was a publication sent out some time ago last year, Santa Barbara's Living Watersheds and Beaches and Ocean. How many people remember seeing that publication? And it puts forward a plan for how to begin looking at these and improving them. So definitely along those lines. Go ahead, Lane.
Yes, I would like to second what this man said. I don't think that high-density housing and preserving the character of our town are exclusive. We have some unique things. I live 3 blocks from City College. We have 17,000 students, as I understand it, about 7,000 that are from outside the area, and about 5,000 of those enter the rental market here. And there's plenty of space there. It's currently being turned into garage space so that people can drive in from the rentals they rent in Isla Vista and other places and then park where they want to study. Why don't we, instead of building a great big parking lot there, build great big dormitories and build our high-density housing right where people study, also downtown, right where people work, utilize some of the space that might be parking for the people who have to drive in to build instead the housing they need, the service workers downtown.
So they don't have to drive.
That's right. You can take the cars off the road, ease the congestion on 101, and eliminate some of the need for the parking by housing people where they work and where they study.
So, very good. So we've heard of live work. This is also live study, and very interesting concept. We can go to Mickey and then this gentleman after that.
In terms of vision, I was struck by the comment that Saks Fifth Avenue used to be Penny's. I'm worried that that will happen increasingly in the future, and some computer models bear that out. I'm worried that the future will see a city of wealthy people and a few poor people in subsidized housing, and that everybody else will be aced out of the housing market. In terms of our land use, if there's some interesting charts and graphs over there, something that I didn't realize. The majority of people in the city are renters, and yet nearly 70% of the land is given over to single-family homes, very few of which are rentals. So we might consider how important it is to maintain a diversity of income levels, a diversity of ethnic groups and races, and make sure that we don't become some sort of enclave for wealthy rich folks being serviced by poor folks.
So your vision, thank you. Your vision is a conservation of this diversity of income and social, ethnicity, and cultural groups. Very good. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one of the things that brought me here so many years ago was the fact that Santa Barbara is a city. It's a small city, not a suburb, and all of the qualities that have been mentioned tonight are qualities of a city, the cultural ambience, the restaurants, the pedestrian ability, people to walk, those are things of the city. And in that sense, we're very different from the low-density sprawl areas of Goleta and Carpinteria and elsewhere. There is room for both. I agree with most of the comments done. There's room for both within the city. But I see a perceived attack on density and what already has been here traditionally, a city, not a suburb. And one of my fears, I agree with the previous comment, one of my fears is not that Santa Barbara would become Los Angeles. That is not possible. But it could become a new Montecito. That is my fear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is where we need the creativity in policy and thinking about the future. How do we avoid that from your point of view as an important issue? Go ahead, sir.
Hi, yes, thank you. Trying to organize my thoughts here. I've been here in Santa Barbara about 5 years, and what I love about it is that the people, the residents, the long-timers bring their neighbors and their outside people and brag about the town, pointing to this building and talking about history of the harbor and all this stuff. Very knowledgeable citizens in this town. I like that. I like the fact that the city actually spends money to do the landscaping, the plants. Every season, all seasons, we have beautiful flowers. I love all of that. In regard to the busing, as far as my vision goes, I have 3 in my head right now. I'm going to bring up the issue of rent caps. We have 58% of the people are renting. Where are our homeowners? If we do a rent cap, the investors will leave the town because they can't make $36,000, $3,600 a month for a three-bedroom house. That's what's going on. And the other vision for the transit system, if we could see a 10-minute bus service on the Hollister corridor and back and forth to Carpinteria, more people would be able to live out there. Workers would get to work, and they would have access to lunchtime. I hear many engineers go out to Hollister on the bus. They get off in the morning. They bought a second car so they can go to lunch, because the bus service out there is only 30 minutes apart. If they could get them to go to the marketplace or downtown Goleta, they would love that. The same would happen in Carpinteria. The third thing I'd like to mention as far as my vision is the homeless people. This is a beautiful town, people. But when our visitors come to town, our tourists come to town, and the panhandling is just relentless. I live downtown, and the same guy asked me, hey, you asked me that 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago. I don't have any quarters. So we've got to show more compassion to the public by taking care of these people. They're sleeping on our benches. And in regard to the parks, I notice we don't have that many picnic tables. I'm sure because the transients turn them into their homes and their tents at night. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate all those different ideas. Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm a low-density person. I think that's part of the ambience. If we had all the possible downtown lots built 3 or 4 stories and inadequate parking, I don't think we would have the same city we have now. And also, I wish to advocate for the car. I'm 70 years old. I would not be here tonight if I had to ride a bus, change, walk in this neighborhood, and try to get home again. So I think you have to keep parking available for everyone.
Right. Again, some kind of mix. No one would probably propose banning automobiles at this point, but we need to keep that in the mix of things. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, as regards the second car at work so people can go to lunch, that's what bicycles are for.
Are you in the bicycle business?
No, but I ride every day.
Right.
A particular project, it may be too specific for this forum, but I'll put it out there anyway.
Good.
I would like to see State Street closed to private motor vehicles between Cota and Victoria.
Okay. Interesting idea.
It should be reserved for...
Okay, let's carry on. We want our...
Yeah, it should be reserved for
open meeting
public transit, emergency vehicles, that sort of pedestrians and that sort of thing.
Again,
Bicycles.
as we're at the 20-year, 50-year, we're looking ahead, look at creativity, what could happen. We'll go to this gentleman, and then in the back row. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just something for the vision of the future. I think the city should concentrate its money and resources on the people who live here. A couple examples. Timeshares for super wealthy people at the Ritz-Carlton at the entrance to our waterfront. That's just a disaster. I guess we can't turn it back. And we also put a lot of city money into bringing more and more tourists here. We fund a tourism agency that advertises this place. And I wonder if they have a cap or a goal. So if they bring 100,000, 200,000 per year, are they done?
Okay, good. Good point. Well, I know there's actually a revenue stream that helps pay for transit and waterfront cleanup and a lot of things. So there is meant to be a nexus between the two, but your point is still very important. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Two things in regards to vision. I would hope that we would talk about housing, open space, and transportation.
Hot.
Hot, exactly. As a continuum, that they're all related rather than piecemeal. That's very important in this process. And secondly, that we put our housing, we put density in our urban core as opposed to creating pressure on the Gaviota Coast, which is a pristine environment, but that we keep the housing in the urban core.
Okay, very good. Well, we're getting to the point where we want to get to our small groups here, so I'm going to just take a few more hands, and we'll be able to delve into more detail, and I'll explain how.
Spent 6 years in the Rockies and just returned last fall, but I have to say that the homeless problem is so much worse than it was even 6 years ago. And I'm glad that someone mentioned that, because with that and then the gang violence in our neighborhoods, these problems need to be addressed. We can talk about architecture, but we really need to address the serious social problems, or people, will begin leaving for that reason because they don't feel safe.
What do you think would be approaches for the housing issue? You talked about homeless. How would we go about addressing that, do you think?
I don't think they're all entitled to stay here. It's a big country. There's a lot of space.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go to this gentleman right here.
I was present at La Casa de la Raza, and I didn't have a time to complete my thoughts.
Okay. You were at the meeting a couple of weeks ago? Or
Yes, I was at Casa de la Raza.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Santa Barbara is supposed to be a city that was founded by Mexican people and on indigenous people's land. And I don't see any indigenous peoples here. Anybody Chumash here? Oh, one. Okay. Any Mexican people around? Couple. All right. At La Casa de la Raza, there weren't many either. I keep going back to Presidio because I think it's an archetypal image of what's going on. There is a magazine called Santa Barbara Seasons, I believe, and an article a couple of issues ago, it described Presidio as one of the excellent examples of Santa Barbara's earliest green buildings because it was made of adobe. Now, I wonder if Auschwitz could qualify as a green building because they turned people into soap and use human skin to make lampshades. Santa Barbara is a town that was protected by indigenous peoples who gathered at Point Conception. Indigenous peoples from all over the continent, the entire Western Hemisphere, gathered at Point Conception to stop LNG. We didn't do that just for ourselves. We did that for all the people in this area, and because it's our duty, our responsibility to protect the earth. Now, on the courthouse of Santa Barbara, it says God gave us the land. To whom did God give the land? And why is the rent so expensive, and our homes are like a shack, what do they call it, a fixer-upper shack, costs $1 million. Now, did God become a landlord, a real estate speculator? Who owns this earth? The earth is our mother. It's not something you can own, and then you're trying to throw out the homeless people. What happened to the Statue of Liberty? It says, give me your homeless. Didn't we welcome you in 1492? I mean, if we had been savages, we should have cooked you up on the beach and have a nice all-white meat barbecue, and we wouldn't have any of these problems. You know what I mean? And then we're all in debt. It's more and more expensive to live in Santa Barbara. My daughter was born here. I tried to build an Indian center and proposed 30 years ago a center where we could gather like this to discuss these problems. And no one supported the Indian center, which used to be across the street from Coda Street. We got people from India to support the Indian center. We had concerts. There was a Buddhist tabla master who performed at Casa La Raza to try to raise funds for the Indian center. But the Indian center doesn't exist. Instead, you have built a park. There's that song, they pay paradise and build a parking lot. Well, build a parking lot for $20 million, supposedly in the name of culture, for the Granada Theater, where I've never been. I will never go. I'll never go. Probably I cannot afford to go see the fat lady sing. You know what I mean? They say that it'll be over when the fat lady sings. Well, it seems like it's over already. You know what I mean? And so I cannot afford to go to the Granada Theater. And I saw on TV that the local chapter of the Schumers that built the Tomals asked for a place to store their Tomals, and that request was denied. And it was only like $50,000. And then there was a youth, underserved youth art project. I'm almost done.
People want to talk.
Underserved youth arts project, that was also denied. And it was because it lacked definition, and the Granada Center, I think, was described as an investment because the arts will improve the value of properties. I think it was the term used. So that means the arts are made for not for art's sake, but for money's sake.
Okay.
So that's a travesty on art.
Indeed.
And then one more thing, the quality of life. Shoes on State Street for toddlers, little shoes like that, $200 for a pair of shoes for toddlers. If we throw the homeless out, we should all buy $200 shoes for toddlers, for our toddlers.
Okay.
And the independent photographed a homeless person in the doorway of a doctor in Central America. And on the same issue, there was an ad for a pair of jeans, $1,200 jeans.
Okay.
And the Independent,
I think we get
publishes the Peeps. Every
Okay.
issue is the full page of Peeps.
I think
right?
I think
but
we get
the
your
poetry of the youth has to be a paid section.
Okay. Well, we need
Thank
to
you.
move on. Thank you.
Of life.
Okay.
Thank you. Whatever
Thank
happened
you.
to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Are we still in the
Okay.
United States of America?
Okay.
Are we violating the Constitution here
Grab.
of all
Hey,
peoples?
Thank you very much. You've brought up more than we can handle tonight in this one meeting, but a lot of things to think about and obviously a lot of concerns here. Are there some other hands? We're going to go into our breakout groups in just a moment. I do see the schedule, but go ahead, sir.
Do I get the last word here?
Well, we have one other one, and we do want to move to our breakout groups. Go ahead, sir.
I'll be curt. I've heard some people say that they're concerned with gang violence in the community.
Yes.
Other people with the homeless, and those are some of the same people that were concerned that the city was going to move up and become New York. Become a city that's too dense.
Okay.
East LA. I think something that we miss is that the social equity issues that we're talking about here, the things that cause the gang violence and the homeless problem.
Alienation, you mean? Or?
Well, are connected to this issue about building up. I mean, we don't. A lot of the kids that are in gangs grew up in homes where they shared a room with 5 or 6 siblings. Okay, these issues of growing up in a place where you're in you don't have your own space, where you're isolated. That kind of tension, okay, that breeds violence.
Okay.
My point here, and I'm getting to it slowly, I'm almost done, is that there's not enough places for people to live in this town that are affordable. Okay,
Right. So
and in order to make those, we need to build up. The idea is that architecture, development, all these things inform these social equity issues. They're all connected. We can't look at them as separate issues. Okay, they're all interconnected, and until we realize that in order to have this happy, healthy, safe town, that takes care of people that have less money, that we need to find a place for everyone to live. Okay, and
Very well stated.
people want to
Very
live
good.
in town.
Thank you very much. And again, those are some of the challenges and points of tension here within the community. And they're going to be here, as someone pointed out, because change occurs. We have a democratic society. We are a capitalist society, a market-driven economy. We're going to have to deal with a lot of pushes and pulls and ultimately allocate very scarce resources and finite resources, and there's not enough to go around. And how do we do this in a humane, compassionate way that does look after all of the members of our community? So a lot of issues need to be addressed, and with that, we are needing to get into our breakout groups, and we'll be able to continue some of these discussions. So we're going to leave that to the groups to determine where you want to focus your time and attention and energy. We've got 5 groups that we're going to set up, and if I could just say a few things about how we're going to do that, and then afterwards we'll regroup and see what kind of themes emerge from all of this discussion. And I really appreciate all of the passion and the energy and the intensity of feeling here that's come out, because that shows the depth and the appreciation that you all have for each other and the issues that are at stake. So I do appreciate that on behalf of the city. You should have on your name tags a group number there, 1, 2, or 3, or 4. And don't anybody move yet, because group 1 will be in that back corner. Group 2 is here. Group 3 is under the clock and out the door to the left, and then, but not all the way out there. And then group 4 is going to be back here in the corner by the yellow barrel. And Group 5 will be over here by the sign. We proceed into that, just a couple of announcements. First of all, if you know any friends or family or neighbors or others in your network, please let them know about our workshop at Hope School. The same program will be repeated July 7th. It's Saturday from 9 to noon, so you're welcome to come again if you like to see the different themes in the discussion. How many people came to one or more of the other workshops in the series here? So I think you'll get a sense of how things are discussed across the board. So it's kind of fun to see that, and please join us at Hope School. You'll note also in here is a form for written comments. We've collected hundreds of these by now, and we're getting more all the time. So if you have anything written down, please turn that in tonight. We'd like to include that in the report. That information goes to the Planning Commission, the city staff, the mayor and council sees it. They're very, very interested. They read everything we produce, and we're committed to a very solid documentation of all of these discussions. And if you go to uplansb.org, you'll find a record of all the meetings, all the upcoming discussions, all the presentations will be loaded up onto the website. So please check it out. So we're going to go into our very brief small group discussions, and we don't like to cut them short, but just in the interest of time here tonight, we're asking for 2 or 3, maybe 4 big ideas, just some interesting highlights from each group to walk away from the meeting with. And I again want to assure you we'll go into depth in recording and documenting all of the notes from the discussions, large groups, small groups, as well as what comes in on the paper that you submit to us. Before we do the reports, though, big hand for our staff and facilitator crew who put the whole workshop together. They did a great job. Thank you very much. As I say, if you talk with any of the staff, you'll see they're very committed and very sincere about this outreach process and very excited about working with all of you. So let's go to group number 1. Do we have a reporter that can come up, and you can again just take a minute or 2 each, and we'll see where we go. And it looks like it's a duo performance here, and you can introduce yourselves and we'll go on.
So I'm representing the first group. My name's Katie Mickey, and this is Margaret Carswell. And these are the big ideas that came out of our group, and they were inspired by this desire that was heard throughout of wanting to preserve this wonderful small town feel here that will allow the people that live and contribute to this town to live here and to support our well-being. So our first big idea has to do with our youth. Turning 2 large centers, the Armory building and the Armory Reserve, into teen centers to support areas where teens can come together and they can have their lives enriched and get them off the street and have the needs that they have get addressed. The community at large, which affects the whole rental scene and drives up the rent in this town. And if City College would take responsibility for housing the people that they educate, and also for their faculty, that would, as is done out at the university, that would provide a great load off of the rental pricing that those who want to rent in this town are at the effect of competing with the renters from City College. And then the other great idea around housing is to address the absentee landlord phenomenon that's very high in this town, or actually absentee second home, third home owner that's high in this town, the people that can afford to own in this town but are not actually living here on any regular basis and have that kind of stake in the town that we who live here do. So to tax the absentee homeowners to perhaps affect that high range that we have of absenteeism. Neighborhoods, to revisit the zoning that encourages the separation and the segregation of different usages within the neighborhoods, to revisit that so that we can have more multi-use neighborhoods, so that we can have a more pedestrian-based lifestyle, so we can go to the market within a local range of where we live, and we can go have amenities and various things like that. Right now, the zoning in many parts of the city discourages that. So we want to revisit that, encourage more of a neighborhood multi-use opportunity. And then addressing transit, there were a number of different suggestions, but the overall theme of that was to support multimodal ways to transport ourselves that are safe and that are cost-effective and that are efficient, that would allow it to be more efficient than using the automobile to be able to get from point A to point B. Often the bicycle or mass transit is a more efficient means, and it will take some of the congestion off the road. Or the trains, electric trains and trains back and forth between our commuter cities in Santa Barbara. So a real comprehensive multimodal approach to dealing with transit in this town.
Very well done, thank you. You notice that technique where you have 4 big headings and then more ideas underneath. You kind of sneak more in that way. Let's go to group 2. Mark?
I'm Mark Bradley. We had a very lively group, and all our subheadings are all out here, so I can. Density, the main idea there was to concentrate the growth on transportation corridors to make it more sustainable, more affordable, and preserve the open space outside of those corridors. So I guess that's the up, not out concept. There was a lot of talk about multimodal transportation, just like the previous group, saying that the city could be a real leader in regional transportation, and because the region's probably going to need a leader in that. And auto, bike, and walkability are all important, so we have to allow for all the modes. Housing, a lot of talk about affordable housing, city, for downtown workers, students, and city personnel, especially emergency personnel and doctors. We talked about social issues. I think there was a pretty good consensus that we need more money for mental health facilities, and that the city could do more there. And also the cities and the school could coordinate for programs for students, so more outreach and funding there, and more youth involvement in all kinds of city activities, maybe even in workshops like this for Plan Santa Barbara we could do in the high schools. And especially when it comes to environmental programs, that's going to be the future. In 2030, they're going to be the ones running the city and doing this kind of planning. So that covers it. Oh, and urban design was another big topic with keep things clean and looking good, but also sustainable.
Thank you. Group number 2, we'll move right to number 3. I see it's queued up there, and so we'll move on.
I'm Shine Ling, and I really liked our group. We had a great discussion, and we spent about half the time talking about housing. But I'm just going to talk about these points, which are the ones that we hands down could all agree on. And one was housing, to provide a diversity of housing types, that we ought to preserve our single-family neighborhoods, but there are parts of town where we can take an opportunity to really create a complete neighborhood where you have mixed uses, you have zoning that allows for mixed uses, housing, jobs, industry, and public transportation that can weave through it, but also a land use pattern that basically provides an incentive for people to give up their car. So, I mean, if everything isn't if you can walk to everything, then then that's how you get people to give up their cars. You don't make a neighborhood where you have to drive to do your basics. So that's that point. We had great kudos for the high standards that we have for architecture and design. It really is how our community contributes to creating the character of the community that we have. Huge component. One great idea that's kind of broad and out there, but not too out there, is if the city of Santa Barbara were to annex the eastern Goleta Valley, is to really take an opportunity to take a big picture look at identifying parts of town which would be open spaces and create a transfer of development rights program where we would take the development rights from areas we'd like to have open space and transfer them out somewhere else where we'd like to encourage density. So put that out there. And then biking and walking paths. There are good biking and walk and pedestrian paths, some, but not enough, and they need to be safe. The ones that came to mind were Calle Real and Foothill Road going east to west. They need to be improved and they need to be made safer so that way everyone can be safe when they bike down and feel that it's not dangerous to do so, and so they can get out of their cars that way. So, yeah.
Very well done. Thank you. We'll go right to group 4. And again, a lot of great energy and ideas tonight flowing. Okay.
Oh, somehow I got handed this. Well, I'm happy to say that I'm happy to see what the other 3 groups before us came up with, because now we don't have to say too much, because I think I just want to say one of the assumptions that we were working with is global warming, the inevitability at the moment, and peak oil crisis. And so we predicated our suggestions on the fact that the future is not going to look like it does today, and that with as the fossil fuels are diminishing, fewer and fewer people will be driving cars. So our idea actually was to, like a lot of people, to break Santa Barbara up into districts, and we had some wonderful ideas, so that we could have decentralized food sources, so that we could all walk to the markets, not get in our car, as I said, to drive 3 miles just to buy a banana to make a smoothie, and that along with that, we had an integrated system of we suggested an integrated system of transportation. Involving, I'm sorry to be repetitive because it's already been said, but I feel like, I should say this because we came up with it, of more buses, more frequent buses, and safe bike lanes, so we don't have to worry about getting run over by someone on with an SUV, and or anyone. And also, I suggested minivans, or like they have in Mexico City, paseros, if you know them, so that in the interim, before we reach the ideal society, we could lessen the number of cars like that are on Upper State Street that are going bumper to bumper, and that we want our city money used for we the people, and we know it's there, to invest in our transportation system rather than other things that it is investing in. Okay, so, and number 2, some people raised issues about emergencies and being cut off by food, our food supply being cut off, and that we use the wonderful volunteer system that Santa Barbara has, and some people in our group felt very strongly about this. Number 3, of course, the obvious one, using alternative energy sources that we could produce right here in Santa Barbara, and we had some highly educated architects in our group who know more about this than I do, but so I'm just quoting them. Offshore wind production, I think, was mentioned at Point Conception, and stuff I don't know about, biograss clippings, using the green waste, when we when the grass goes in those green recycle cans, that we use that and recycle it into energy. And what have I missed? Oh, okay, housing, yeah, okay. So also, like everyone else, it was a touchy issue, the issue of housing, but we did, I think, agree, if there's anyone in my group that wants to say different, that there should be a more low-income and moderate housing. But we did have a discussion about the word density, whether that's the best word to use, because, Kathleen, do you want to say something about that?
Sure. Density has become such a negative buzzword. You use the word density and somebody pictures a 10-story tower with no stucco and no Spanish decor at all. And I think what I preferred was to talk about that we increase the availability of low and middle income housing as appropriate in each neighborhood. Throughout the city, and it doesn't have to be dense. I mean, if you go from really low density, I hate to use the D word, but only a couple of houses on an acre, and you could go to 6 houses on that acre, and it could still look real good. My point was, you don't have to say it can only be 40 feet, it can only be 60 feet, it can only be 20 feet tall. You say to the urban planners of Santa Barbara, who are smart, and we have an architectural review board that really looks at everything, and say, okay, how can we make this block have enough housing units to support the neighborhood and afford a grocery store and still have it look great? And we have enough talent to do that. So instead of making rigid, limited density laws and try to get away, we'll leave it up to you guys to figure out how to get away from the D word.
One more thing, just on a real positive note, because I'm sure we all feel overwhelmed, like, we have to just transform everything, but we felt, which we do, but that these are all doable even within the resources that we have now. We don't really have to build anything, for example, something like more frequent buses. And also, we talked about the transportation systems that many of us have experienced, like you, in Europe, where you can get around on mass transit, and we don't have to have a subway or anything. But so we wanted to emphasize that these are very doable goals, and we, the people, just have to push for them as hard as we can and enlighten more people about the issue of peak oil crisis. There were people in my group that had never even heard of it. And so hopefully we could do more education in that area.
One further expansion on emergency preparedness, because I don't know if the gal is still here, but it was a very, very good point she made in reflecting on the horrible situation in New Orleans. And we've all talked about how if we get an earthquake or something here, our policemen and firemen are going to be in Ventura and Lompoc, and we might be cut off in every way. That if we had districts or neighborhoods that were really organized, and maybe you use the Red Cross to do the training, but if the city could sponsor a real program, a really official program, where people would become like neighborhood captains and have the water and the food bars and stuff at their house, we could do so much good. I mean, I was told by a Red Cross worker that if everybody in New Orleans had 3 gallons of water and 10 balance bars in their house, it would have been a whole different scenario. So when you think about that and her comments about having our districts and having serious emergency preparedness in your own neighborhoods, we were excited. We thought that was a unique idea to our group.
Thank you all very much. We're going to go to group number 5. I think I'm also going to buy stock in the company that makes balance bars. I think there's an opportunity. Let's go to the 5th and final group.
Hi, I'm Keith Kaufman-Gray. We talked about everything you've heard before, and we narrowed it down to 3 big ideas. And we talked about housing, and you notice you don't see it up here. Well, we definitely did talk about housing. So what got us started was the environment. And we just went over what is the environment. Are we talking about environment of trees, environment of living, There's all kinds of definition for environment. And from there, we processed, and the first big idea was everything is related. Housing, transportation, we can't isolate one without affecting the other. So that's one of our really big ideas. And everyone touched on it tonight, but that's something we have to always remember. Everything is interrelated. The next is walk our talk. Again, this is back to the environment. We need to live within our resources. We can't just build and build, build. We have to think of what we have. Geographically, we're a very narrow space here, and we need to allocate, for the human. Like we were talking, we get into housing, and it says allocate space for people, not cars. Talking about, well, do you really need 2 parking spaces for a unit that's built downtown? That's a discussion that needs to be continued. So that's where we got to this point of allocating space for think about people first and the environment. And the third one is economics. This was kind of interesting. We don't know a solution to this, but it's an idea. There's been a lot of concern about, in our downtown core, local businesses are disappearing. And you start to see Starbucks on every corner. I'll use Starbucks. Everyone likes to bash Starbucks. So, but, is there a solution? Can we restrict this? I don't know, and no one in our group know. But we're concerned about it, that local businesses are going out, chain stores are coming in, and downtown is going to look like Buenaventura Mall if we don't watch out. Or actually a higher scale, I guess Santa Monica Mall. I don't. But, it is a concern that we had in our group, and we felt that was a big picture. And also tourism. Tourism is very important. We wouldn't have all the things that we have in our city if we didn't have the tourism dollars that came in. But maybe is there a limit? Are we getting so much tourism in our city that the type of jobs that it's creating is creating a problem for our overall environment for the city? I mean, are we creating a lot of lower paying jobs with tourism that is affecting the housing and everything else? So we need tourism, but is there a point where it's detrimental to the city? So those are our 3 big ideas. You notice housing still isn't up here, but like I said, we really did talk about housing, and it will go into our comments with everything else.
Excellent. Thank you very much. 5 very interesting reports, and we appreciate your willing to work with us on the format here and getting those ideas distilled. It helps us to capture that. I want to recognize our 2 graphic chroniclers here, Andy and Tim. Thank you very much. And again, on behalf of the city, I really thank you for coming out this evening and participating. We'll be around to answer any questions. All the staff are going to be here. And thank you very much. Have a great evening. We'll see you in the future meetings.